Peninsula. That wasn't too hard to do. They are making significant progress in their efforts to capture Basra itself. Bob Arnott told us that there was some fire that had been taking on there, and Jack Straley, some Marines involved in that. So that is an actual fight that's been going on. But on the whole, this is being prosecuted in a way that the Americans must feel awfully good about. And remember, they are watching very carefully these possible surrender talks with high-ranking members of the Republican Guard, and we will very much like to see how that turns. But for now, I am Forrest Sawyer, heading toward 2 a.m. East Coast time, broad daylight in Iraq. We will be following this 24 hours a day. Do stay with us. For now, this is MSNBC.
Good morning to all of you on the East Coast. It is 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm Alex Witt with our MSNBC continuing coverage of Target Iraq. 11 p.m. Good evening to those of you on the Pacific Coast. We are taking a look right now at a live picture of downtown Baghdad. It is now 10 a.m. there local time. There you are seeing some movement on the streets there, though certainly not what one would expect to see under normal circumstances inside of Iraq. The capital city there of that country. Some people going about their daily business and trying to have some sense of normalcy to their lives, but it certainly is not as crowded as one would assume at 10 a.m. on a weekday Friday. We also have a picture there of David Bloom of NBC News. He has been spending the better part of our evening with us. He is traveling there with the 3rd Infantry Division. They have now moved from their former base in Kuwait through across the border into the southern part of Iraq there in the desert. David, we will be speaking with you, but can you give us any sense of your location at all there, about how long you've been on the move there once you got into Iraqi territory?
Well, the attack began, the ground war, at 8 o'clock local time last night, which is noon on the East Coast, 9 a.m. on the West Coast, with about 30 minutes of artillery strikes. Then we moved into Iraq, across the Kuwaiti berm, through an electrified fence that had been cut, and then also through the Iraqi berm. We moved up to a forward position here in southern Iraq. That's about all I can say about where we are. And basically what we're doing is we've sort of grabbed the foothold here for the U.S. Army's 3rd Infantry Division, and then the rest of the troops are going to roll out of Kuwait and are in the process of doing that right now toward this location. When they get here and the force forms up, then they'll make some decisions about what routes they take up to Baghdad, if indeed that's where they're going, and certainly we know that that's where they're going.
All right, David, we're going to come back to you in just one moment. First, everybody, we're going to get you caught up in the latest headlines. This is an Operation Iraqi Freedom, as we are doing every quarter hour for you round the clock. Beginning with this, U.S.-led forces continue their ground assault from Kuwait into Iraq after a series of artillery barrages. British troops have stormed the Al-Faw Peninsula at the head of the Persian Gulf. That is a key route for oil tanker traffic. You just heard my colleague, NBC's Forrest Sawyer, telling us that it is believed those British troops have now taken control of the Al-Faw Peninsula. Meanwhile, huge explosions, they are heard near the southern Iraqi city of Basra. U.S. officials are saying that intelligence strongly indicates that Saddam was still inside the bunker. Possibly he was injured. All of this when that bunker was hit on Wednesday night. And the Washington Post is reporting that U.S. officials knew that Saddam was making taped statements, all in anticipation of Wednesday's deadline. Pentagon officials say no hostile fire involved in the crash of a U.S. Marine helicopter, much like the one you're going to see shortly on your screen. It was a CH-46 Sea Knight. It went down in Kuwait, killing all 16 aboard. We're told there were 4 Americans believed to be Marines, also 12 British paratroopers, we believe. The Sea Knight was assigned to the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force. We are, of course, going to recap all the latest headlines on the Iraqi crisis for you every 15 minutes or so. You can also get the very latest anytime. To do that, go to the web, iraq.msnbc.com. All complete coverage for you, including the in-depth analysis, slideshows, video. You're going to find it all at iraq.msnbc.com. Just a short while ago, about an hour ago, the air raid sirens went off once again in Kuwait City. The fear a possible possible missile attack by Iraq could be a biological or chemical attack as well. Let's go straight to NBC's Don Teague. He is live in Kuwait City for us. Don, it's good to see you without the gas mask, Don, as we have come to see your familiar face behind that mask of late. Tell me what's going on right now.
Well, trust me, it's good to be here without the gas mask on as well, too. They gave us the all clear about 30 minutes ago. By my count, it's between the 8th and the 9th air raid siren that we've had in about 22 hours since around noon yesterday when this all started here. We've come to learn through experience that sometimes these air raid sirens just go away and then we don't hear the follow-up, and sometimes they did indeed signal the arrival of a missile inbound from Iraq. We know that the U.S. military has shot down at least 2 inbound missiles. We're not exactly sure what kind of missiles, but we are sure that it was Patriots that intercepted them successfully and brought them down. A third missile that also was sent into this area, the military won't say, or they say they don't know specifically what brought it down, only that it also landed in an area away from any damage to people or equipment. But, you know, clearly we're taking all of these seriously. When the sirens go off, we're doing what we have been told to do and what the military does, which is mask up until we get it all clear that there are no chemicals involved.
Don, what about the people there in Kuwait City? Are they reacting as quickly and as fervently as you are there?
Well, that's hard to say. We don't see all of the people, but interestingly, the people we do see are probably people who either have a great deal of faith or simply have no masks and no way to protect themselves anyway, because during this last air raid, I watched a cricket game about a half a mile from here. I can see it from my vantage point. They never stopped playing cricket. I don't even know that anyone looked up to see if anything was flying over, but I've actually seen one Kuwaiti of the 2 million people in this country actually with a gas mask, so I don't know that there's a lot many can do about it. We saw over the past few days that some were preparing safe rooms in their house, doing what we've been told about with duct tape and putting up plastic sheeting and such. And indeed, many people are not out on the streets. It's pretty vacant anywhere you go here, so we assume most people are at home and taking shelter there, but there are some people who are out just doing their thing, and the alarms don't seem to bother them at all.
Don, what about the weather, the heat there, and most importantly, perhaps those sandstorms? Have you been affected there by that?
No, you know, when the military is moving, they tend to sometimes create their own mini sandstorms because tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles kick up a tremendous amount of dust. There's also a low cloud ceiling today, which can cause problems for particularly helicopter pilots who are then forced to fly at lower levels. Generally in the military you fly at low levels anyway, but it takes away some of your options of getting up above the terrain, and if you combine sand with low clouds and some other issues, it can be difficult flying out there, particularly at night. Heat's not too big of a factor. It's shirt sleeve weather, but we had our jackets on until a couple of hours ago, so far the weather's really not that bad in that respect.
All right, thank you so much, NBC's Don Teague. We appreciate the live report. We will check in with you again there in Kuwait City. Now let's go back to NBC's David Bloom. He is traveling with the 3rd Infantry Division there. He is somewhere in the southern regions of Iraq, not too far beyond the Kuwaiti border, where he's been on the move, as he described, for probably about 14 hours now. Good, well, morning to you. I guess it must be approaching afternoon there. Well, no, it's shortly after 10 o'clock in the morning, I believe, David. Tell me what is the latest from there. Describe the setting for us.
Well, Alice, I mean, we're out in the middle of the desert is basically the setting. What this is the lead element of the U.S. Army's 3rd Infantry Division, which has about 20,000 soldiers in it. But we're with the 315 Infantry of the 2nd Brigade of the 3rd ID, which basically means these are the guys who were the first ones across the border into Iraq because, as I've said, their mission was to hit 2 observation posts, first with artillery, then with infantrymen, to make sure that they could not relay a message back to Baghdad as to where the 3rd ID would be rolling into southern Iraq from. Because obviously if they know where they're coming in from, they can anticipate what routes they might take, and this force obviously doesn't want them to do that. Right now we're stopped and basically waiting for the rest of the force to catch up with us, because obviously when you've got 6,000, 7,000 vehicles, 20,000 soldiers. It takes a long time to move them through those lanes into southern Iraq. So basically, we're at a staging area here inside Iraq, where the rest of the force will then catch up with us. And then, depending upon what's going on in Baghdad with Saddam Hussein and his possible injury, or maybe even death. We don't know what happened with him, but based upon what's happening on the ground, both in terms of Baghdad and in terms of the forces of the Republican Guard and the Special Republican Guard arrayed against them, then they'll make choices about how quickly they make a beeline for Baghdad.
David, how successful was that mission to clear the way? Was there any sort of significant encounters on behalf of those gentlemen there in the 3rd Infantry Division?
No, they've encountered only light opposition so far. What they were doing is they were hitting these 2 command posts, which each contained between 10 and 30 Iraqi soldiers. And, not to be glib about it, but I mean, from their perspective, they wiped them out. And they felt like they had to do that because, obviously, they don't want a message getting relayed back to Baghdad as to their whereabouts. So they hit it hard with artillery for the first half hour. We were told, we were listening on the military radio, that they started the bomb. We could see the pictures, and maybe you guys have those and maybe you don't. We could see the artillery strikes going off in the distance, and we were told that at 8:07, 7 minutes later, those 2 command posts were wiped out. When we finally got up to them after the infantry soldiers had been there as well, all we saw was smoldering remains of those 2 command posts. So as I say, they've encountered only light opposition thus far. We're also hearing reports that the 11th regular army division of the Iraqi army has capitulated, has surrendered, and that other Iraqi regular army divisions may be either contemplating or actively engaged in surrendering as well. If that's the case, and again, we don't know that definitively, we're hearing that over the military radio, but of course we're standing out here in the middle of the desert. But if that is the case, that's A, not surprising, because the regular Iraqi army was not seen as a formidable fighting force, but B, it's also good news because obviously it suggests that some component of the Iraqi military structure is surrendering to the U.S. forces, which is exactly what they'd hoped for.
David, might some of those come and surrender to your group there, the 3rd Infantry Division, because you have moved into Iraq right now, and the reports are that Iraq's 11th Division there is moving southern, so it would seem that your 2 forces might meet up. Was that to be expected?
It could be. Again, I don't want to say too much about where they are and where we might be, but the fact of the matter is that, and I tried in my discussion with Forrest Sawyer a little while earlier to sort of allude to this as cryptically as I could. There were entreaties made long before this conflict began to those regular Army commanders to say, look, here's a capitulation document that you can sign, and if you sign this capitulation document, you won't have to fight, you can surrender, you can put your men in garrison, you can put your vehicles in a square, you can be separated from them, and we won't engage in hostilities. In fact, you can be in charge of your men, and we'll disarm you, obviously, but they're going to leave a very light force behind and keep on rolling. But whether this particular element of the 3rd Infantry Division has been in contact with them as yet, I can't say.
David, do you know how long you expect to be stationary there as you wait for the other troops to come and join you?
Interesting that you should ask that question because I think that we're going to get rolling here momentarily. We'll try to show you some live pictures of that as we're moving along, but I got to wrap this up pretty quick, so if you've got maybe one more question, and then we've got to get going.
All right, David, one thing, how safe do you feel right now there in the middle of the desert? I see nothing but sand in the picture that we're looking at with you there on the phone to hear my questions. I've seen a couple of tanks off in the distance a bit, but they are not in a large grouping. So do you feel like you could be any kind of a target, or are you just so lone and isolated that absolutely not?
Yeah, I think that right now we feel pretty alone and isolated. I mean, having said that, there's artillery that they could certainly rain down upon us, which is notoriously inaccurate but still deadly if by happenstance it happens to hit you. There's also the possibility that that artillery could be loaded with chemical munitions, biological agents, which is why we're in these chem suits, what they call MOP-1, which means that you've got the chem pants on, you've got the chem top on, but you don't have your gas mask on, you don't have your boots on, you don't have your gloves on. So, I mean, it's certainly the case that there are potential threats out here. Having said that, we're comparatively safe. The fight that they anticipate fighting isn't here. It's much closer to Baghdad.
All right, NBC's David Bloom, you've said you have to get rolling there with the 3rd Infantry Division. We do appreciate your live report, David. Stay safe, David, and we'll check in with you again as soon as we can.
Thanks, Alice.
All right, let's go now to Central Command, the very latest on the Marine helicopter crash and also the situation in the Iraqi city of Basra. To do that, we're joined by NBC's David Schuster. He is live at CENTCOM in Qatar with all of that. Good morning to you, David.
Alex, good morning. And the numbers seem to be changing a little bit regarding that CH-46E Sea Knight. Our British colleagues are now reporting that they've been told that there were only 8 British soldiers that were on board that aircraft. Earlier, Central Command had said that there were 12. And that there were 4 Americans. In any case, 4 Americans apparently killed, 8 or 12, depending on what the information is, that were on board that helicopter. In any case, the information is that that chopper went down at about 3 o'clock in the morning, local time here. It was en route back from Iraq. It was 8 miles apparently across the border into Kuwait when, according to officials here, there was no evidence, no indication whatsoever of any hostile or enemy fire, but rather that this was a weather-related problem. This particular kind of helicopter has 2 rotors, which can tend to kick up a lot of dust. And remember also that the pilot was using night vision goggles at the time, and that can make a judgment very difficult as far as trying to figure out where the ground is and looking at the horizon. And that seems to have, at least there's some indications that may have contributed to this crash. But again, everybody on board that chopper was killed. British and American authorities are apparently now on the scene. It apparently took them a couple hours to get there, but they are reviewing what happened. As this is going on, of course, there's also more information coming out now about what's happening in southern Iraq. British military officials are suggesting that the Al-Far Peninsula, a key peninsula of southern Iraq, is now completely controlled by coalition forces, and that these coalition forces are marching towards Basra. Basra, a very important city in southern Iraq. It's the 2nd largest city in Iraq. It's a mostly Shiite population that has now no great love for Saddam Hussein after rebellion there 12 years ago was brutally crushed by forces loyal to Saddam. There's every expectation here at Central Command that when coalition forces take the city of Basra, there'll be some sort of jubilation and celebration in the streets, that the coalition forces will be seen as liberators. And Central Command very eager to have those sort of pictures transmitted across the Middle East, but also across the rest of Iraq, in the hopes that somehow that will crush the spirits of Iraqi soldiers, perhaps still putting up a fight towards Baghdad. The other important thing that we're being told by, again, British military officials here is that some key oil equipment, some oil pumping equipment, which is essentially Saddam Hussein's pipeline into the Persian Gulf, that is now in control of coalition forces, and that this pipeline had the potential, if Saddam wanted to cause some trouble or try to slow down coalition forces, that he could have either lit the pumping equipment on fire, or he could have simply pumped a lot of oil into the Persian Gulf to make matters worse and sort of get rid of his oil that way. That has not happened. Military officials very satisfied that this oil pumping equipment, some of the oil fields in southern Iraq, are now in coalition control. No fires, at least in these particular oil fields and the oil pumping equipment closest to the Persian Gulf. And again, every indication that Basra is a key city where coalition forces clearly marching towards Basra. They clearly have an objective of trying to take it perhaps very soon. Alex?
All right, David, but I want you to once again reiterate the numbers we were talking about in terms of the fatalities in that chopper crash. You say that we are amending those numbers downward now?
Well, British military officials now apparently saying that there were only 8 British Royal Marine Commandos who were on that chopper. We had initially been told by U.S. Central Command that there were 12, but now that figure has apparently changed to 8 British Royal Marines on board. And then the number of Americans on board has not changed. We're still being told 4 Marines, that would be the crew of this transport helicopter, 4 Marines killed on board.
All right, NBC's David Schuster at CENTCOM in Qatar. Thank you very much for that live report. We will check in with you again as well, David. And now it is just about 1/4 the hour of 2 a.m. here on the East Coast. Let's get you caught up with the very latest headlines as we do round the clock here in our coverage of Target Iraq. These headlines in Operation Iraqi Freedom now. U.S. and British military officials report that oil fires in southern Iraq The cause of those fires is unknown at this time. Also, NBC News' David Bloom is reporting that the Iraqi 11th Army Division may have surrendered to coalition forces. U.S. Central Command has not yet confirmed this information. However, if true, this surrender would mark a major setback for Saddam Hussein's defense capability. There is also some evidence this morning that Saddam may have been injured. Intelligence sources are saying that emergency medical personnel were sent to the bunker after it was hit on Wednesday night. Intelligence officials believe that Saddam, as well as family members, notably 2 of his sons, also other Iraqi leaders, were still in the bunker at the time of that strike. San Francisco police have arrested more than 1,000 people in anti-war protests. It is the most taken into custody on a single day in that city in decades. Thousands of anti-war protesters have swarmed around ramps onto San Francisco's Bay Bridge. We are now going to go to our Bianca Sorlizano. She's at the Listening Post with a recap of what's going on and how all the news headlines are playing out around the world. Good morning to you, Bianca.
Good morning to you, Alex. Well, this is interesting. Our viewers have been watching coverage here in the United States, seeing how we here in the U.S. are covering this war, but we're looking around the world now, seeing how other countries are covering this war. Our first stop for you right now, headlines out of Japan. This comes from Mainichi Daily News. There's an article here. They're expressing fear about one of the human shields. Right now in Baghdad, there's supposed to be 30 Japanese, about 17 of those 30 reporters, and 6 human shields. Well, foreign ministry officials say that since the bombing started, they cannot get in contact with one of those human shields. They're trying to track him down, but of course they are now worried for his life, worried for his safety. That's one of the stories, moving from human shields to TV ratings in Japan. I'm going to read this from here. The headline says, "War, a boon for NHK." That's a Japanese broadcasting company. Taxpayer-funded broadcasting company. NHK can expect a ratings boon after being swamped by callers regarding the war in Iraq. So they're talking about how people there want to watch and know what's going on with this war in Japan. They said that on the night when the bomb started to drop, they originally were going to show a drama called Oshin, which was being screened to commemorate the 50th anniversary of television broadcasts in Japan. And ironically, it was enormously popular when it first aired 20 years ago, especially in the Middle East, especially in Iraq. But they pulled that off air that night, showed war coverage, and people were watching. So those are just some of the headlines beyond the basics in Japan, how they are covering this war right now. And Alex, next time around, I'll tell you some stories that are making the papers, making the headlines in this war from Australia.
All right, we'll look forward to that. Thank you so much. Our Bianca Sorlizano at the Listening Post. Let's go right now to the Pentagon. That is where NBC's Carl Rochelle is standing by with the latest from there. Carl, I understand we have some new video we can bring to our viewers on that raid from Baghdad last night. Look at the lighting up of the sky right there with some direct hits, certainly.
Yeah, flying some hardware in there, and it looks to me like what we're seeing there, Alex, is some Tomahawk cruise missiles launched in there, but we are not getting operational information on that right now. It's still out there. We're still trying to check it out. We're trying to check out a number of things. One is the discrepancy in the figures on the casualties from the CH-46 helicopter that went down, and David Schuster was reporting now that the British were saying 8. The last figures we have from the U.S. side is that there were 4 U.S. Marines on that chopper that went down that did die, and there apparently is some discrepancy in the numbers. We're hearing both 8 British Marines or British soldiers, and also we're hearing 12, which would make the casualty totals either 12 or 16, depending on how you do it. So we're still trying to sort out those. We do know that it was flying at 3 a.m. Apparently would be using night vision goggles, night vision equipment at that time of evening. Absolutely no one's confirming that for us here at this point. And also, we are told that it was an accident, that it did not go down as a result of friendly fire. Looking at those pictures of Baghdad, I can tell you one thing, that we are told by government sources that that emergency medical equipment was rolled into that bunker in Baghdad that Saddam Hussein was believed to have been in early Thursday morning Iraqi time, late Wednesday evening U.S. time, Eastern time, when 3 dozen Tomahawk cruise missiles hit that area, and the bombs, the bunker buster bombs from those 2 F-117s hit it. Still no readout for sure on whether Saddam Hussein was taken out or not. We are told that he did, in fact, make videotapes, believed to have made videotapes in advance of the attack. The reason why you know that is because they believe there were no direct references to any of the strikes that took place on Iraq. Even though the date was mentioned, the date was easy to come up with because President George Bush had set a deadline date, so you could factor a date in, but not a time. They're still trying to determine when those tapes were made and try to determine whether Saddam Hussein is still alive or not. But we are told by these government sources that the presence of him on Iraqi television is not a confirmation that he's still alive, Alex.
Carl, interestingly, the Washington Post has an article which is going to post in just a short while in the morning when it comes out. And there is a woman who claims that she was Saddam Hussein's mistress in Iraq for many years. She is among the people who have looked at Saddam Hussein on this tape. She does not believe that the person in that tape is Saddam Hussein. And in fact, this is a woman who has worked with officials before in intelligence and has led them to the evidence of a double acting as Saddam Hussein. Is there any reaction to that inside the Pentagon at all?
I was told, Alex, by my sources that don't go too hard on the body double idea, but there were some serious questions raised about whether this was in fact Saddam Hussein. And the reasons they pointed out are he is wearing glasses in this picture. He is reading from what appears to be a steno pad. That is quite different from the normal appearances of Saddam Hussein on TV. Typically, he does not wear glasses. He uses a teleprompter. He puts on a very slick presentation, if you will, a very professional presentation. He could be an Iraqi TV anchor almost. His presentation is that professional. And that's one of the reasons they say Saddam Hussein, they're not really sure whether it is him or is not him. They are trying to determine that. They're looking at the tape to see when it was made, if they can figure that out. They're also doing a comparison with a voice print, a voice analysis of that to see if it does in fact match the way they work those things up, the lines on graphs on certain words. It will tell you speech patterns to try to see if in fact it is Saddam Hussein. But we don't know, quite frankly, whether he's alive, whether he's wounded or injured, or whether he is dead. We're still trying to find that out, and so is the U.S. government, by the way, Alex.
All right, Carl, we will look to you for the answers once those questions have been answered. Thank you so much. Do appreciate your time. NBC's Carl Rochelle at the Pentagon. Well, instead of unleashing a full air assault, the U.S. and Britain launched precision strikes into Baghdad several hours ago. It was the second time that the capital city was struck. With me now in our war room to discuss what's going on right now is retired Marine Major Jack Stradley and Dan Garay, the Vice President of the Lexington Institute. That is a nonprofit public policy research organization. Dan, by the way, was also a former Defense Department official during the Persian Gulf War. Gentlemen, glad to have you both, Major and Dan. Let's talk about these. First of all, to you, Major. Now, these were precision strikes, were they not?
Absolutely. They were Tomahawk missiles. Also probably F-117 stealth fighters dropping precision-guided ordnance.
And how does this differ from the kind of precision strikes that we were able to do 12 years ago in the first Gulf War?
Well, similar weapon systems. We had the Tomahawk missiles then, we had the stealth fighters then. It's just several generations more advanced, better guidance system, more pinpoint accuracy. Where we were coming accurate to dozens of yards back then, we're coming down to literally feet now.
So how do they hone in on these sites? Is it a GPS-guided system?
Well, it depends, yes. The Tomahawk uses a combination of inertial guidance and GPS and several other things, terrain following features, to take it to its actual target, what's programmed in. And it can also be adjusted once it's in flight.
Okay. I want to ask you, Dan, about these precision bombings. Do we know, first of all, why we've decided to go this route instead of do the shock and awe, the unleashing of everything that we've got in the initial stages of this campaign?
One has to assume that this was intended from the beginning, not driven by the target of opportunity. That's too simple. That means we had to have had contacts and probably intelligence sources inside the Iraqi high command, inside the military, that suggested that with a little push in the right direction, we might get this system to collapse from inside. And there's at least some indications, you've been hearing it from David Bloom and others, that this might be true. We might be seeing a wholesale defection or surrender of Iraqi units.
Would that mean that we would never have to launch the shock and awe strategy?
That's right. one might not have to do that, or we would do it in very selected areas. For example, against some of the Republican Guard units, if they persist in resisting. So it would not be, global shock and awe across Iraq. It would be, if you will, precision shock and awe.
And indeed, Major, one of these locations was the Iraqi Republican Guard, was it not? One of their headquarters?
It was their headquarters in Baghdad. So we're consistently going after significant targets of command and control, air defense facilities, communications facilities. Very consistent campaign to, again, decapitate the Iraqi government, the military leadership.
And how crucial is the Iraqi Republican Guard to any sort of success militarily for Saddam Hussein?
Well, it's absolutely crucial. The Republican Guard, the Special Republican Guard, the Special Security Services are the most well-trained, the most loyal troops there. They're the only ones that we expect to really put up a fight. They're not a match for the forces that they're facing from the U.S. and coalition, but they are, in fact, probably going to fight to some degree.
All right, Dan, I'm also being told MSNBC has learned that a special security organization in Baghdad was also struck. What do you know about that? And are these the same kinds of things, again, that were struck back in '91?
Yes, actually they were. The special security organization is run by Saddam's youngest son, Qusay. It is really the guardians of the guardians, if you will. It is there to keep an eye on the Republican Guard and the other security organizations. It is about somewhere around 5,000 troops. They do special communications, which is probably why they were struck. They do some of the security service stuff. They're really, in a sense, the ultimate goon squad, perhaps the Gestapo of Iraq.
So these are all facilities that have been wiped out 12 years ago and rebuilt from the ground up?
Well, they were struck. Some of them were struck very heavily, and essentially the buildings were destroyed. In other cases, they were only damaged. It varied rather widely, but it turns out that the Iraqis, bless their little hearts, went right back and rebuilt these facilities and went right back to business. So, to a certain extent, it's known sites. We've done this before.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to stand by just for a moment. We want to reset for all of you. We are rapidly approaching the bottom of the hour. I'm Alex Witt, and as promised, we are giving you the latest headlines every quarter hour. This in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Let's bring you up to date right now on Target Iraq. A British military spokesman says coalition forces have taken control of the Al-Far Peninsula, this in southern Iraq. The official also says that forces are making significant progress in their efforts to capture the key southern Iraqi city of Basra. Also, the BBC News now reporting that scores of Iraqi troops have surrendered to British Royal Marine Commandos operating in southern Iraq. Officials at U.S. Central Command now say that 12 casualties in the crash of a U.S. Marine helicopter in Kuwait are confirmed. The Pentagon officials say, however, no hostile fire was involved in that crash of the CH-46. That sea night went down, killing all 12 on board, 4 Americans and 8 British. The Sea Knight was assigned to the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force. Meantime, the U.S. Senate unanimously approved a resolution in support of all those forces. This resolution expressed gratitude to the troops, their families, also offered support for the president as our commander-in-chief. It also thanked British Prime Minister Tony Blair and his government in the UK for their support. We will recap the latest headlines on the Iraqi crisis for you every 15 minutes. And you can also get the very latest anytime on our web. To do that, go to iraq.msnbc.com. Gentlemen, I want to get back with you, retired Marine Major Jack Stradley, also Dan Garay. Let's get back to the attacks, the assaults on Iraq. Again, the question being no more the shock and awe. It's not necessarily a crucial part to success if things go as expected, Dan.
Absolutely. It may be that we don't have to inflict the kind of destruction or casualties that we once thought we would have to do, or it'll be restricted. It may involve only attacks upon the Republican Guard, Special Republican Guard, very selective, and we will be able to occupy essentially most of Iraq without much of a conflict being conducted.
What about presidential palaces, Major? Presidential palaces and the like being a place to target in advance of allowing Saddam Hussein to get there. In other words, eradicate that kind of a safe house which he might go to.
Well, very legitimate targets. And you have to understand those presidential palaces are actually military encampments. There are troops there. There are communications facilities there, bunkers, things like that. So targeting those things is essential to the prosecution of this campaign, and they are legitimate targets. I'm sure they're on a target list and will be executed in due course.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said it was Tomahawk missiles that were launched into that Ministry of Information, I believe, building where Saddam Hussein is believed to have been with perhaps his sons underneath. How far deep down do those Tomahawk missiles go?
Well, normally a Tomahawk missile or a cruise missile is generally a conventional one, carries about 2,000 pounds of high explosives. And so they go in and can take out the buildings fairly easily, level those, create shrapnel, kill people on the ground. What happened after that, though, was the two F-117 stealth fighters dropped bunker buster bombs, 2,000-pound bombs with special fusing that allows them to delay, penetrate concrete, penetrate earth, and explode much deeper in the ground. And so the idea was to come in, knock out the things on the ground, maybe create a little bit of a hole, if you will, and then come in and with a precision-guided, laser-guided munition, specifically target what was thought to be the bunker and drive it deep and try and create a shock effect down there, blow it up.
And in what kind of rapid succession would the Tomahawks then lead to those that were dropped, the bunker busters?
They would be right on top of each other. The coordination of that kind of thing can be down to literally within seconds. The F-117s are on station, standing by. As the Tomahawks start to explode, there's a timeline, and they would roll in literally seconds after the last explosion went off of the Tomahawk missiles.
Dan, is it believed that all these presidential palaces and these important buildings, official buildings of the Iraqi government inside Baghdad, have these sort of bunkers underneath them that have been built for security, for safe houses?
Oh, lots of them have it for a whole variety of reasons. Look, this was going on well before even the first Gulf War. The Iraqis have been at war for well over 2 decades. You put these bunkers under all kinds of buildings. They learned, of course, after the first Gulf War, the importance of trying to dig deep as a way of defending against U.S. weapons.
Also, Major, I want to ask you about the explosions that have been heard in Mosul. Can you tell me what you believe is going on there right now and why?
Well, we have some oil fields up in the area of Mosul and in northern Iraq there. Not real sure. We haven't got a lot of really good reports of what might be going on up there. There's some information about the Kurds up there possibly moving into that area. There's also the potential for some light infantry, either air mobile or airborne, moving up to the north potentially to secure the area of the oil fields there. But really, I don't know. I'm just purely speculating right now.
Is it possible that these explosions are not as a result of U.S. artillery strikes, that this would be something, perhaps, as you said, the Kurds are there, this could be something localized that way?
It could be any number of things, yes.
Okay, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much. We'll have you back and discuss a little more about what's going on right now. Dan Garay and Major Stradley, thank you so much. All right, let's head right now to the White House. Let's get right now to our Jessica Yellen, who is covering things from there for us. And Jessica, tell us the reaction of the president today to the day's events.
Hi, Alex. Well, from the White House, there was very cautious comment about the progress of the war so far, but in private, administration officials seemed pleased with that progress. The battlefield reports, they say, were encouraging. They say they even had signs that top Iraqi leadership may already be crumbling. Now, of course, that mood was dampened by news that 16 U.S. and British troops died in the crash of that Marine helicopter we've been reporting about. So far, the president did not comment on that, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see him express his condolences to their families later today. Now, at the end of this evening, the president retired to the residence. Before he went to sleep, he got late-night briefings by both Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld and his National Security Advisor, Condoleezza Rice. He plans to depart for Camp David later today. Now, if you listen overall to the messages coming out of all branches of the administration, you'll hear a continued message of the inevitability of coalition victory. You keep hearing it. They are insistent that Saddam Hussein will be overthrown, if in fact he hasn't been killed already. Of course, officials still are not saying if they believe Saddam is dead or alive, and again, cautious with their comments on that topic as well. Now, again, administration officials confirmed that discussions are ongoing with members of the Iraqi Republican Guard, that country's elite military force. You've been discussing that with the military experts there. Of course, there are obvious psychological and strategic advantages of high-level defections, as you've been discussing, but it also would be a great political victory for the White House as well, and we could talk a bit more about that if you like. Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about that.
Okay, the Republican Guard, as I said, not only defends Saddam Hussein, but they also protect the city of Baghdad itself. And if this Republican Guard were to crumble in any significant way, it means that the U.S. could possibly avoid a pitched battle over Baghdad, which has been a great concern for a number of reasons, partly because from the beginning of war planning, there have been worries that coalition troops might get drawn into very ugly street fighting in Baghdad with high casualties both among allies and Iraqi civilians, and all of it quite possibly caught on U.S. and Arab television. Both would be a tragedy and very bad in terms of public perception. So if these top guard members defect and that weakens defenses for Baghdad, it could be a great political victory for the White House. Alex.
Jessica, let's also talk about these more countries now that have been added to the list of nations supporting the war effort. I told 15 more just today. Can you tell us a bit more details about that?
Right, it's the so-called coalition of the willing that the White House has been talking about. Some of those new countries include places like Costa Rica, Mongolia, the Solomon Islands, all places where support is really symbolic more than anything else. But the White House continues to hammer home on this point that there is broad support internationally for this war effort, that every major religion and ethnicity is represented. But as you know, many traditional U.S. allies still do remain fiercely opposed to the war effort. Alex.
Indeed. Thank you so much for the live report there from Washington. MSNBC's Jessica Yellen. Thanks, Jessica. We'll check in with you again as well. We're getting some news right now, everyone, from Reuters wire service. They are quoting the BBC and telling us that the Kirkuk oil fields in Iraq have now been secured. We're not sure if they've been secured by British or U.S. forces, but certainly by the coalition forces there. Once again, Reuters wire service telling us, according to the BBC, the Kirkuk oil fields have now been secured. Of course, all this on the heels of southern Iraqi oil fields being lit on fire, supposedly. We've had some NASA intelligence gathering the information for us from satellites way up high in the sky, and we were told that there were 2 oil fields on fire. There has yet to be concrete confirmation on the number of oil fields that could be on fire, but we know there are some there in the south. Kirkuk oil fields being there in the north. Again, once again, we do believe they have been secured. Let's go right now from this information to the Arab nation of Jordan right now. That is where relief workers there are bracing for a flood of refugees fleeing Iraq. NBC's Mike Taibbi, he joins us live near the Jordanian-Iraqi border with more on this impending crisis. Good morning to you.
Hi, Alex. How are you doing? And the word impending is the correct one here. The crisis hasn't really arrived yet. Not that there haven't been difficulties. This is the camp behind me, one of the 2 here. It's called Camp B, Camp Bravo. For third country nationals, that is non-Iraqis living in Iraq, who have left Iraq because of the war and want to go back to their home countries or need to go back to their home countries. As I say, not without problems. It's always the young and the old who are most affected, most profoundly affected by this type of trauma, having to uproot and move. We have information that 1 older man and 1 infant, 1 newborn, as it was described to us, were taken to hospital. The older man had a heart attack. We don't know the status of either his medical condition or that of the child. About 440 people were kept overnighted in this camp. They got up this morning at first light. We were here at that point. Everybody seemed in reasonably good shape at that point. Some kids were playing soccer. Other people were gathering their goods, bringing their suitcases out in front of their tent, because the plan is, the second part of the plan is to leave from here via bus and go back to Amman to arrange transportation from there back to their home country. We spoke a little bit earlier with Sebastian Carlier, who's with the International Red Crescent Red Cross, and he explained the circumstances of the travel for the people who had to spend the night here.
The things are looking better now. It's still very cold, about maybe 5 degrees, so people are not really used to that kind of temperature here, but things are okay now.
From the time, on average, from the time that they left Baghdad, got on that bus, until the time they were situated in a shelter here, you say it was at least a 12-hour drive. How long in total was it that they had to spend before they could finally sit down and be situated here?
According to some of them, I mean, for instance, I talked to somebody like a couple of minutes ago. He said that they left Baghdad yesterday at 12 o'clock, at noon. So, and they came today at 7 o'clock. So this trip was really long. But some other people said yesterday that it took them like 12 or 15 hours.
Now, we use generic terms to describe this part of the crisis, refugees on the move, having to get transportation. You can see behind me that the buses are ready to take most of the people who are here, about 200 of the 300 or so who are still here, off to Amman. But they're all individual stories, and we spoke with a number of those families. One in particular, a man about my age, 52 years old, with a wife and 1 child, same circumstance I have, who has built a life and a career and has a bank account, an apartment, or had those things, because he decided, as soon as President Bush gave his ultimatum to Saddam Hussein, that he himself, and his name is Motasim Mohammed, had himself been given an ultimatum, and he decided to go to his embassy and to arrange to leave to become a refugee, now on the way back to Amman. This is Mike Taibbi reporting back to you, Alex.
All right, Mike, I do want to ask you, though, certainly Jordan is not very keen on having a rush, a flood of refugees come their way. And in fact, Secretary Donald Rumsfeld earlier this evening said that people in Iraq should stay in their country. Aren't there provisions being made to help refugees or people who are displaced by any possible military activity to stay there, get them food, get them shelter, get them water, get them medical supplies, but staying within the country of Iraq?
Yeah, actually, a lot of those plans have been discussed, but they're always in flux. Presumably on the other side of the border in the no man's land or just east of that, still in Iraq, there are plans of maybe housing some people there and getting shelter kits in position there. But Jordan, as a contiguous country on the other side of the border, is preparing for an onslaught, a flood as you described it before. Perhaps as many as 100,000, 200,000 refugees if the bombing becomes so intense that that flood starts. It kind of feeds on itself. And people are not going to want to stay in Iraq because they feel it still is a target. And it's the individual refugee who makes a decision that I'm going to become one, I'm going to leave. And that's what these people have done, leaving lives that have been established. That's what tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands are thinking of doing at that point of decision right now as the war is in its third day.
Mm-hmm. And any kind of creature comforts there, I mean, how hard is it to live under those conditions for any length of time, Mike?
Well, this is not, you know, a couple of days of light roughing it in the country, the camping trips that some of us might remember from our childhood. This is, you get on a bus, you travel for 15, 19 hours, you get processed at several points, and you find yourself in a cold place. He was talking about 5 degrees centigrade before, about 40 degrees. It felt colder than that this morning. You sleep in a tent, which may be reasonable enough, but the dust was blowing in. You get up and you take a walk across the cold to a latrine that's been set up. You can wash in these spigots that have been set up because there is running water. Hopefully there's enough food, and I say hopefully because there have been problems with some of the NGOs running these camps and getting enough money to provide all the resources. They say they do it, they can do it, they can handle 5,000 at present, more than that if necessary, and more than that again if the third step arrives where they have 20,000 filling this one camp to capacity. But it's not an easy life, and you know the kids were laughing this morning. We talked to some of them, and they seemed okay. It's one night, but if it goes on for 2 nights, 3 nights, 4 nights, and the uncertainty on the other end of where they're going to go, it wears you down. And as I said, the stress was enough that one man had a heart attack, and we don't know the medical problem that sent the newborn to the hospital, but it's difficult. It really is.
All right, Mike Taibbi, thank you very much for that live report from the refugee camp there along the Jordanian-Iraqi border. We'll check in with you again as well. We are now at 45 past the hour. As promised, the very latest headlines now in Operation Iraqi Freedom for you. U.S. and British military officials report oil fires in southern Iraq. The cause of these fires unknown at this time. Also, NBC News' David Bloom is reporting that the Iraqi 11th Army Division may, I repeat, may have surrendered to coalition forces. U.S. Central Command has not yet confirmed this information. However, if true, this surrender would mark a major setback for Saddam Hussein's defense capability. There is also evidence that Saddam himself may have been injured. Intelligence sources are saying that emergency medical personnel were sent to the bunker that Saddam Hussein and his 2 sons were believed to have been in downtown Baghdad. This after it was hit on Wednesday night. Intelligence officials believe Saddam and other Iraqi leaders were still in that bunker at the time of the strike. Back domestically, San Francisco police arresting more than 1,000 people in anti-war protests. It is the most taken into custody on any single day in that city in decades. Thousands of anti-war protesters swarmed around ramps onto San Francisco's Bay Bridge. We're going to recap the latest headlines on the Iraqi crisis for you every 15 minutes right here on MSNBC. You can also get the very latest anytime on the web. To do that, you go to iraq.msnbc.com for complete coverage. The in-depth analysis slideshow is also video. Once again, go to iraq.msnbc.com for that. Let's go right now to MSNBC's Bob Arnott. He is somewhere along the northern Kuwait border there. We're told he's with the Expeditionary Forces. You've been riding on choppers, Bob. Tell me what you know about the chopper that went down earlier that killed at least 4 U.S. servicemen.
Well, this was the most dramatic. It was really the boldest military foray in the war so far. A dramatic insertion into Iraq to secure some of the oil-producing fields. We do not want to tell you where. Tremendous amount of fire. AC-130 gunships laying down fire being returned. The Cobras from our base here were able to suppress a great deal of that fire. They are still in action. Our mission was to take British commandos into that region. we were with one squad. I do not want to give the name, but unfortunately one of our helos did go down. We'll just take a moment and just tell you how privileged and honored we were to know these men here at our base. We saw them enter their helicopter, 4 Americans. We saw 8 British commandos enter this helicopter. The flight conditions at the time we took off were reasonable. Thick sort of haze, but probably 2 to 3 miles of visibility. East of our camp, the visibility went down to between 1/4 and 1/2 of a mile. With night vision goggles, it's impossible to see in that kind of visibility. Sand spewing in the air, a wind enough to get a good deal of sand there. The report is that, what eyewitness account is that the helicopter pitched down and that there was a fireball on impact. Our condolences to these families. I think those words probably are not strong enough to express the feelings that we have for these men, that we know other Marines at this base do. It's a tremendous tragedy. We were the trap aircraft. This is a recovery aircraft. We were sent actually to recover these individuals, hoping they were still alive, but then we were called off when we found that they had not survived. The mission itself is said to be a success. British troops are engaged at this point. They have been able to secure all the major targets. It's an ongoing operation, so I don't want to tell you where it is. It does have to do with a major part of the oil distilling and distribution business in Iraq. Strategically, here we are at a base of tremendous air assets here. So I was lying down in the desert last night when we first hear the Predators go overhead, very loud engine. You hear the C-130s come in overhead. Our helos up, 46 and 53s, the Cobras, the command control. It was a very, very dramatic scene last night. Not much resistance being met by the mechanized units moving up over the border, but this is a deep, deep inversion. A very bold move by the U.S. Marines here, who like to think that they are first and foremost, and often are. They had to use night vision goggles. I was able to use some of the goggles, and it really does sort of bring a day to night, except in that circumstance where you have a tremendous amount of sand and very, very low visibility. At that point, the rest of the mission was called off, brought back. We are back here at base, and we are ready to resupply units that are in there and on standby here at the key intelligence headquarters here, where intelligence is being gathered on a minute-by-minute basis on operations inside Iraq. Back to you.
Bob, can you tell us with whom those British troops are right now engaged in combat that you referred to? Is it members of Iraq's 11th Infantry Division, or do you know?
We've very specifically been asked not to communicate division numbers. What we know is that there is a real firefight ongoing. This is a strategic target. The Iraqis are dug in deep. They fired back at Cobra gunships, not a really smart move usually. They fire back at the AC-130s. They have a unit you hear a lot about, which is the DSU-23 millimeter anti-aircraft gun. These are ubiquitous. The anti-aircraft weapon of choice throughout southern Iraq. You could use it with radar, but often use it without radar. They're firing U.S. forces there. Real firefights, but despite this, the British commandos have been able to perform a major blocking action so that the Republican Guard cannot escape out of that region to try and protect Baghdad. And that's been a very, very important move for this war. We had a tremendously dramatic mission, and our hearts really go out to those crewmen. As I say, we got to know and love their missions.
And Bob, my final question to you on a personal note for those soldiers who have lost their comrades, how difficult is it for them to understand they have lost their friends, their compatriots, and yet have to move on? How well can they do that?
Well, it was interesting. I was speaking to one of our crewmen named Buell. He was best friends with the pilot of the aircraft. I actually was down yesterday morning with the pilot, what they call the comfort trailer, where you shave and you have a shower. And I asked him, and there's a steely resolve there. I mean, he was bitterly disappointed. He was clearly suffering greatly. But like so many other members of the crew, just one last thought before you're back here, is that we've heard so far that this is the mission that we've got to do. It's changed with them, what's happened. People are now saying, we're going to go out and we're going to kick some butt. We're angry now, we're going to get back. These Marines are charged up and they're ready to retaliate for what happens to their fellow Marines. Thank you.
All right, Bob Arnott there somewhere in northern Kuwait. We will not divulge your location for security reasons. Thank you very much for the live report, Rob. Much appreciated. Well, a very key part of the military strategy has been to prevent the Scud missile attacks on Israel. Of course, Iraq fired dozens of the Scuds at Israel back in the 1991 Gulf War. There is now fear, of course, of chemical or biological weapons being associated with any kind of incoming missiles into Israel. Let's go right now to Keith Miller. He's in Tel Aviv with the very latest for us on that front. Good morning to you, Keith.
Good morning, Alex. Well, I can tell you that here the stress level, if you will, has gone down remarkably. The government had held out all along that the first 48 hours of this conflict were crucial to Israel's interests, in the sense that they thought that Saddam Hussein, if he had the capability, would go ahead and fire Scud missiles towards Israel, perhaps loaded with chemical or biological agents. That has not happened. Still, the alert here remains very, very high. Everybody in Israel has been issued with a gas mask. You can still see people on the streets carrying their individual gas masks with them. All of the children who attend school must bring, of course, a gas mask with them. Meanwhile, I must point out that the Israeli government is saying that they think the possibility of an attack from Iraq has been reduced greatly after the first 48 hours of conflict. At the same time, we have a 24-hour overflight, intercept fighters flying over Israel in case the Iraqis launch a drone or plan some sort of attack from the air. But again, that's marginal. At the same point, they've got concrete rings, if you will, around this country, principally with anti-missile missiles. They have their own, the Israelis called the Arrow missile killer. Then there are batteries of Patriots manned by American soldiers. So basically the people of Israel are sitting tight, feeling at this particular moment, Alex, that perhaps the first wave of fear has passed them by. The streets here are still active, but not as much as normal. Certainly many people deciding just, you know, we'll sit it out. They're only 300 miles or less from the Iraqi border sitting in Israel, so it's not like they're that far away. So people are staying home, keeping their kids out of school. We were told that school attendance yesterday was about 10 to 20% maximum. That may be going up today, again, with that first sense of fear, if you will, in this country diminished somewhat, Alex.
Keith, how resolute is the Israeli military or government to responding to any sort of incoming missiles? As you're well aware, the Bush administration was hoping that they would not launch their own attacks and get involved into the fray under those kinds of circumstances, yet understanding that they would want to protect and defend their country. Do you believe that there will be launched attacks from Israel should they come under attack as well?
Well, Alex, we're getting a public, and then I can also fill you in on the private conversations going on in Israel. Publicly, the Prime Minister, Ariel Sharon, says that they will retaliate if there is an attack by Iraq. I think that's mostly for public consumption. The Americans have gone to extraordinary lengths to make sure that Israel does not get involved in this conflict. They don't want this to be seen as an Israeli-American conquest of Iraq. Mind you, if the Israelis are hit with chemical or biological weapons, then I think all bets are off, and you can expect the Israelis to retaliate with vigor. In the meantime, the Americans have set up special command centers here. They're filling in the Israelis almost hour by hour. In fact, I'll take it moment by moment. They're letting the Israelis know what the progress is in Iraq, and they really don't want the Israelis involved in this, and they're doing all they can to stop them. Go ahead, Alex.
All right, Keith Miller, I want to thank you for that live report from Tel Aviv. We will check in with you again as well. Everyone, we are following all the latest developments for you all day. Now, Dateline NBC's Dennis Murphy takes a look back at day one, a very busy day here in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Take a look.
Parts of central Baghdad were burning out of control tonight. A government ministry run by one of Saddam Hussein's sons, a presidential palace, a home of one of Saddam's wives, Republican Guard strongholds, all hit in a brief but ferocious assault from U.S. cruise missiles and 2,000-pound penetrating bombs. Peter Arnett, reporting for National Geographic Explorer and NBC News, described the view from his window as thunderous explosions lit up the night sky shortly after 9 p.m. Baghdad time.
Big explosion near the presidential palace. You will hear those explosions now.
It's the second attack on Baghdad in 16 hours. Missiles launched from sea. Smart bombs dropped from stealth warplanes like this one. U.S. officials said they intend to hit the apparatus of Saddam's Stalinist state like a boxer. Punch hard, step back, pause, and see if it needs another one. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld said today the big violent display is just beginning.
What will follow will not be a repeat of any other conflict. It will be a of a force and scope and scale that has been beyond what has been seen before.
To the south, U.S. Army howitzers slammed shell after shell into Iraq from the Kuwaiti border. And then the ground war was on. U.S. Army and Marine units are in Iraq tonight, pushing north in coordination with British troops.
Hey, welcome this way.
Some forces are coming under light fire. So far, one coastal Iraqi town has been taken. And a Special Forces helicopter made what U.S. officers describe as a safe crash landing in operations near Baghdad early Thursday. The Iraqis claim they shot it down. The crew of 6 was safely evacuated. The Iraqis also fired some mortar and rockets to no effect at U.S. troops that haven't moved out yet on the Kuwaiti side. NBC's Dana Lewis with the 101st Airborne joined the soldiers as they put on gas masks while a horn honked out a warning of another missile attack. Scenes like this were repeated many times today along the Kuwaiti front. The war began yesterday at dawn Iraqi time with the first air raid, a total fake-out, a directed lightning attempt to kill Saddam Hussein and his top leaders. Anti-aircraft fire over Baghdad was followed moments later by an orange fireball at what was described as a target of opportunity. A private home outside Baghdad where electronic intelligence gathering had eavesdropped on a meeting of top-ranking senior Iraqi military, as well as Saddam and possibly both his sons, Qusay and Uday. The compound was flattened by a barrage of cruise missiles and 2 bunker buster bombs designed to slam into subterranean chambers and explode. A few hours later, Saddam Hussein appeared on tape on Iraqi TV denouncing the president as Bush Jr., a criminal. But some U.S. officials wondered whether the subdued man with the unfamiliar glasses, reading listlessly from a lined pad, was actually Saddam or a double. Tonight, some analysts believe this is Saddam, but think the message may have been taped before the first air raid. So the question remains, is Saddam dead or alive? As U.S.-led forces under the cover of artillery barrages make their way toward Baghdad and provincial cities, propaganda leaflets explaining to the Iraqis how to surrender are being printed and airdropped by the millions. If the Iraqis do make a stand, it is likely, military strategists think, that it will happen in Baghdad, the sprawling city of 5 million people, an ancient capital enshrouded tonight in smoke and paralyzed by a fear it's hard to imagine.
And good morning to all of you. It is 3 a.m. in the east. It is midnight, just past Pacific time. You're looking at a live picture being provided to us by the camera traveling with NBC's David Bloom. David is traveling with the 3rd Infantry Division. As you can well see, they are on the move. We can tell you they are in southern Iraq at this point, having been on the move for the better part of the last 14 hours or so. David Bloom was telling us earlier, as he spoke with us in our last hour, before being taken on the road, that their mission was successful. He was along with the troops that had gone in, those Marines, to secure the route through which the remainder of the 3rd Infantry Division would follow behind David and those Marines. What they had to do, literally, was, in David's words, not to be glib, he said, but they had to take out Iraqi posts there, of which there were anywhere from 10 to 30 or so Iraqi military units there in those posts. They were completely wiped out, destroyed. You can take from that what that would mean. They had to do that in order to keep those posts from reporting back to Baghdad or for their military operations central command that indeed the United States and coalition forces had passed through that way. They did encounter some mines that needed to be removed along the way as well. Again, this is with the 3rd Infantry Division. All Marines, as they have been progressing northwards towards Basra, we believe, but that is a very vast expanse of desert. They could be in any specific sort of geographical line from